Assalamu alaikum. Imam Mark here, and just came off of the first annual 2018 Blackamerican Muslim Conference, and some people have been asking, "Oh, what who couldn't attend? What'd you think of it?" And I'm like, man, it just ended, so I haven't really had a lot of time to reflect on it quite yet. So this isn't going to be any kind of like in-depth review, but I thought I would share maybe one or two things. And I thought, instead of giving my thoughts or criticisms, especially as a panelist or a moderator, which sometimes happens, I thought actually I would share what maybe just one or two gems that I walked away with, even though I was a panelist and even though I was a moderator. I was listening. I was listening to the other people, listening to what they had to say, and meaning that I myself myself had the intention to try to gain benefit from it. And sometimes there's this the idea like, well, I'm there to give everybody else benefit, not gain it, right? So I thought I would just share some of my reflections. So the first one that really comes to mind is I think it was the panel on spirituality, and I can't remember all of the panelists. I think it was Ustad Aisha Prime, Ustad Zainab Ansari, Imam Dawood Walid, might have been Dr. Ware, and then Dawood Yassin, and that's who I'm just going to share something on. So anyway, in this talk on spirituality, one thing that stuck with me was some remarks that Imam Dawood Yassin had made on the subject of spirituality. In that he brought up this conversation. I think it might have been between him and Dr. Bilal Ware, where they were talking about quitting sugar and food ethics, and then the topic of quitting sugar or something came up, right? And it's something that I had done myself once before for about 9 months. And what I really appreciated about Imam Dawood Yassin's comments was that he said, real spirituality, and of course I'm paraphrasing here, but real spirituality, when it manifests as a practice, not just some sort of collection of platitudes or aphorisms or sayings or incense and burning candles or whatever, right? When it really manifests, it's gonna require discipline, and it will require discipline because there will be an element of it that is unpleasant. And I was, for myself, very relieved to hear somebody else speak about the topic of spirituality in a way that it isn't only some sort of either feel-good thing, like burning incense and candles or whatever else, right? Or some abstract moral, ethical platitudes that never comes down out of the sky. And that the reality is that if you want to use spirituality itself as a means and not an end, right? Which I think is also very important that he was giving us, is that sometimes spirituality, particularly in the West, in the modern age that we live in a kind of post-religious context, spirituality is sometimes in this murky area where it might even be thought of as an ends and not a means. And therefore, if spirituality is a means to a greater end even beyond itself, some part of it, not meaning you have to intend it to be, but some part of it, if it's going to be real, it's going to be unpleasant. So he said, about quitting sugar, he's like, man, it kind of sucked. or even sucks in that, it was hard and it is hard. And yet obviously, out of that, he's gained, some wonderful benefits, obviously physiologically, alhamdulillah, Imam Dawood's in great shape and he's a great example for us, to live healthy lives as Muslims. But then you also really got the feeling that outside of purely the physical benefits, that it was also allowing him to gain a pathway to dealing with those other aspects, right, of the nafs, of the soul, of desire, passions, right, those things that if they're not put within a certain framework, that they could lead to not just simply the displeasure of Allah, but they could gain one punishment or rob one of pleasure, meaning in the hereafter. Because a lot of times we talk about Allah's displeasure in a one-sided way, right? You may do something and that act may indeed lead to the displeasure of Allah, right? Which is a really nice way of saying you might get punished in the fire, right? You might get punished in the hereafter, punished in the grave, whatever, right? But then the flip side of that is you're robbing yourself of happiness, bliss, contentment, whether in the grave, being illuminated, whether on the day of judgment, an easy reckoning, an easy hisab, or then obviously in the garden, right? That's why I'm trying to, it's sort of like a SoCalish winter right now, so I'm trying to do this in my garden. It's like I like, that's why I like having a garden, reminds you of where you're trying to get to. So for me personally, it gave me something walking out of that conference that I have the intention to renew my spiritual struggle, whether you want to call it tazkiyah, purification of the nafs, the soul, whether you want to call it suluk, whatever your mustalahat buzzword is, so meaning that and I'm not trying to, probably if Imam Dawood ever sees this, he's going to be like, man, this is embarrassing. And may Allah reward you, Imam Dawood, may Allah reward him, in that it gives me something to walk away with that I can put my hands on, right? Which is something very much missing, I think, today with all of this abstraction, right? And that was one of the things I spoke about was, we need to de-intellectualize, right, our Islam, not meaning that we don't pursue knowledge anymore, right? But it's just not to be clever. So that was, maybe I'll share some others later, but at least to begin, for some folks that were asking, that's what I really got out of it. I don't know if at some point, Lamppost will release, some of those things publicly or not. You may go back and watch it and be like, wow, that's it. You made this video just over one comment. But I'm just saying, for me, that was powerful, and that is what really struck. So may Allah Ta'ala give us the strength to get down to serious business about our time in the grave, our judgment, and the hereafter, because it's serious business. My daughter wants to get in on this, but so Jazakumullahu khairan. Imam Mark signing off. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.